pregnant, cast out at the border. The Alpha King chose to carry her with his own body. The wind howled across the frozen borderlands, carrying with it the scent of iron and snow. Jagged cliffs cut sharply into the sky, their peaks lost in swirling gray clouds. Below, a narrow trail wound through the dark forest, where twisted trees creaked like old bones. On that trail, a lone figure stumbled forward, her cloak torn and mud-caked, her hands pressed against her belly. Elora had not cried in hours. She had no one left to cry for. The kingdom she once called home had turned against her, branded her a traitor, and cast her out into this desolate land. Her body shook not just from the cold, but from the terror and exhaustion that clung to her like a shadow. She was pregnant, a truth she had to keep secret, for no one here would offer mercy to a lone, abandoned girl. Her mind spun with memories she could not escape. The betrayal had come from within her own castle walls. Trusted advisors, jealous nobles, even those who had smiled at her in the sun now whispered behind her back. She had been accused of crimes she had never committed, accused of betrayal that had never existed, and now she was alone, her child unborn, and the path ahead shrouded in uncertainty. The snow grew thicker, coating the world in white silence. Elora's legs faltered. She collapsed onto the frozen ground, her lips trembling. She wanted to lie there, to let the cold take her, to end the endless ache in her chest. But a voice inside her whispered otherwise. The child she carried needed her. If she died here, the prophecy, the child's fate, would die too. A sudden crack of ice made her jump. The wind carried another sound, faint but unmistakable. Footsteps. Fast, deliberate, and heavy. Elera's heart hammered. She pressed herself against the ground, hoping the snow and shadows would hide her. "Who's there?" she called, her voice barely more than a whisper. The footsteps stopped. A shadow moved among the trees, and then a figure stepped into the clearing. He was tall, broader than any man she had seen, and his presence alone made the air feel heavier, almost alive. His cloak was dark, almost blending into the night, but his eyes glimmered, golden, sharp, and calculating. Stories of his cruelty had spread across the lands like wildfire. He was said to be unfeeling, a man who crushed all who opposed him. Yet now, here he stood, looking not with hatred, but with something far stranger. Interest. Elora struggled to her feet, her fists clenched. "Stay back!" she demanded, though her voice wavered. "I am not yours!" Cale's eyes narrowed, and a faint smile touched his lips, almost amused. "No one belongs to me yet," he said, his voice deep, resonant, and unsettling. He stepped closer, and the air seemed to bend around him. "But this," he said, gesturing toward her belly, "belongs to destiny, and destiny does not wait." Fear surged through Elora, but so did curiosity. How could he know? She had hidden this secret from everyone. And yet, in his gaze, she sensed no malice, only recognition, like he saw the child as something more than she could understand herself. You shouldn't be here," she said, backing away. "This land is cursed. It will take you." Kyl's expression darkened, a shadow passing over his golden eyes. "Curses are meaningless to those who control their own fate," he said. His gaze softened, just slightly. "But you will not survive alone. Not in this place, not carrying what you carry." Elora shook her head. I don't need anyone. You need me," Kyle said simply. "And whether you accept it or not, I am here. That is your choice." For a moment, the wind fell silent. Even the snow seemed to pause, hovering in the air like frozen sparks. Elora's fear warred with something else, a strange pull she could not name. She wanted to flee, to hide, to reject him, but her body trembled with exhaustion and longing she did not understand. Why help me? She asked, her voice trembling. Cale took a step closer, so close that she could feel the warmth of his presence, though the air around them was frigid. Because this child, because you, are tied to me, to my blood, my fate, whether you believe it or not. Elara's mind reeled. Tied to him? How could she be tied to a man she had never met, feared all her life, and whose name alone struck terror across kingdoms? Yet something in her gut told her he spoke the truth. There was power in him, yes, but also something else. Something dangerous, yes, but magnetic, undeniable. She sank to her knees again, unable to stand. Her strength was gone, and with it her resistance. Cale knelt beside her, surprisingly gentle for a man of such strength. His hands hovered near hers, then rested lightly on her shoulders, not as a captor, but as a shield. "You will come with me," he said softly. "You have nowhere else to go. I will keep you safe. That is my promise." Elara's lips parted, but no words came. She could feel the truth in his tone, the weight of it pressing against her chest like a winter storm. She wanted to resist, wanted to fight, but the exhaustion, the fear, the hopelessness, everything in her body screamed surrender. Cale extended a hand, and she took it, trembling. His grip was firm, unyielding, but not cruel. For the first time since her exile, she felt a flicker of safety, a hint that perhaps she could survive, perhaps even her child could survive. The journey began at dusk. The path led through frozen forests, where shadows seemed alive, moving in the corner of her eye. Strange whispers echoed between the trees, and for a moment, Elara thought she heard the cries of those who had perished here before. She pressed herself closer to Cale, her hand gripping his arm. "You're afraid," he said, not unkindly. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above the wind. "I'm afraid of everything." "Good," Cale replied. "Fear keeps you alive, but courage will save you." Hours passed. The cold bit at their faces, their breaths forming clouds that vanished into the dark. Finally, they reached the edge of a cliff, overlooking a frozen valley where the moonlight shimmered on ice like silver fire. Cale stopped, pulling her gently behind a rock. "They will come," he said, his golden eyes scanning the horizon. "Those who fear prophecy, those who fear what you carry, they will follow." Elara's heart raced. She did not understand the prophecy fully, only fragments she had overheard in whispers. Her child. It was said the child would bring change, either salvation or destruction. And now she was with the man who claimed it as part of his destiny. "I don't want to be a part of this," she said, her voice breaking. "I just want to survive, for the child." "Then survive you shall, and in time you may find that destiny has chosen more than survival for you." Suddenly the wind picked up again, carrying a chilling howl that was almost more than the snow could bear. Shadows moved across the valley below. Elara felt the first real stirrings of fear, not for herself, but for her child. Cale placed a hand over her stomach, and for a moment she felt a warmth she had not known in months. "The child will be protected," he promised, "even if I must face every shadow in this land." Elara looked up at him, seeing for the first time not just a king, not just a predator, but a man bound by his own fate, as alone in the world as she was. A shiver ran down her spine, not of fear, but of something like hope. And then, from the darkness, a whisper floated on the wind, faint, cruel, and mocking. "She does not belong to you yet." Elara froze. Cale's hand tightened slightly over hers. His eyes glimmered like molten gold, full of storm and fire. "The border is not safe," he said, his voice low, and neither are you. But I will carry you through it, if you let me." Elara's heart raced. She did not know what letting him meant. Could she trust him? Could she survive under his protection? Could her child survive in a world that wanted them dead before they were even born? Her lips parted to speak, but the wind stole her words. All she could do was clutch his hand, and together they stepped into the shadowed forest, leaving the borders and the life she had known behind. And somewhere in the darkness eyes glimmered, watching, waiting. A storm was coming, and Elara, cast out and alone, would face it, with him. The fortress rose from the mountains like a black tooth, sharp and unyielding against the gray sky. Its walls were cold stone, crowned with crimson banners that flapped violently in the wind. Inside, the corridors echoed with the whispers of generations of kings and warriors, and the air smelled faintly of iron and smoke. Elara's eyes widened as Kale guided her through the massive gates. For all its beauty, there was a sense of danger here, a weight pressing down from the high towers, the shadows, and the very stones themselves. This place. "It is magnificent," she murmured, though her voice held more awe than comfort. Hale's golden eyes flicked toward her, unreadable. "It is strong," he said, his voice calm, like a river flowing beneath ice. "It will keep you safe." Elara wanted to trust him, but every instinct screamed caution. She had survived betrayal once. She could survive again. Yet something about Kale made her hesitate. He did not threaten her, nor did he speak with cruelty. Still, the air around him was heavy with authority, and a kind of power she could feel pressing against her chest, making her breath catch. "You will stay here," Kale said, stopping before a large wooden door carved with symbols she did not recognize. "This chamber will be yours. Guards will watch the halls. None will harm you. Not while I am here." Elara pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the child stir. "And the prophecy?" she asked quietly. "What does it mean for me? For my child?" Kale's expression darkened. "It means your life has changed forever. And not just yours. The child you carry is tied to forces older than any kingdom, older than any crown. Those who fear it will hunt you. Those who understand it will protect you, or try to control you. You must decide who you trust." Elara swallowed hard. She had never imagined herself in the center of such power, such danger. Her child, so small and fragile, already carried the weight of kingdoms and curses. The thought made her chest ache. Inside her chamber, the fire in the hearth burned low, casting long shadows across the walls. The room was surprisingly warm, furnished simply but elegantly. Kale set a small bag of supplies on the table and regarded her carefully. "You should rest," he said. "You will need strength for what comes." Elara nodded, but she could not sleep. She paced the room, her mind racing with questions. How could a child she had only just begun to know have such power? How could Kale, a man she barely trusted, be bound to her fate? The answers seemed tangled, unreachable, and frightening. As night deepened, Kale returned. He did not knock. He simply stepped into the room, his cloak brushing the floor, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. "You do not sleep," he observed. "I cannot," she admitted. "There is too many questions." He moved closer, slowly, deliberately, until he was near the hearth, where the firelight painted his face with sharp contrasts of shadow and flame. "Questions will not change what is coming," he said softly. "But understanding your fears, that might." Elara turned to him, startled by the gentleness in his tone. You speak differently than I imagined," she said. "I thought you were merciless." Aiel's lips curved faintly. I am merciless to those who threaten my people, my lands, my bloodline, he said. But you are not a threat, not yet, perhaps never. You are part of something greater than yourself, and I will not see you destroyed. The warmth of his words unsettled her. She wanted to argue, to push him away, to maintain the distance she had fought so hard to survive. But something inside her longed for a measure of safety, a hand to hold, a presence that promised she was not entirely alone in this dark world. Days passed. Cale remained distant but present, like a shadow that did not vanish, always near when she needed him, always watching when danger loomed. Alara observed him carefully, noting his habits, the way his golden eyes never left the corridors for long, the subtle tension in his muscles, even when he appeared relaxed. One morning, as the first sun touched the frost-covered battlements, a messenger arrived, a young soldier bearing a letter sealed with the emblem of a neighboring kingdom. Alara took it, her fingers trembling. The seal was unfamiliar, ominous. She opened the letter and read silently, her eyes widening with fear. "They know," she whispered. Cale took the letter from her hands, scanning it quickly, his brow furrowed. "Yes," he said quietly. "They know the prophecy is moving. They will act. We cannot wait. You must learn to trust and to fight." Alara shook her head. "I do not fight," she said. "I barely survive. That is all I know." Kael's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "Survival is the first step," he said. "But this is larger than survival. You carry hope, and danger, and power. You must understand that, or the world will destroy you before you understand it yourself." He left her then, and she was alone with her thoughts, her fears, and the stirring life within her. The room felt colder without him, though she had only just begun to recognize the strange comfort his presence brought. Later that night, she was woken by a sound outside her door, a whisper, a scrape of boots on stone. Her heart pounded. She pressed herself against the wall, listening. The corridor was empty when she peeked, but she felt the presence of something unseen, watching. Cale appeared silently at the doorway, his cloak dark as the night. "You should not wander alone," he said. His tone was not commanding, but concerned, almost gentle. "Even here, even inside these walls, shadows linger." Elara's lips trembled. I felt something," she admitted. "Something watching me." "Fear is a guide," Cale said, stepping closer. "Do not ignore it. Learn from it. Let it prepare you." He placed a hand lightly over hers, and for a moment Alara felt a calm she had not known since her exile. The firelight danced in his eyes, and she saw not just the Alpha King feared across kingdoms, but a man who carried burdens, regrets, and an unspoken longing. Over the next days, Cale began to teach her in small ways. He showed her how to move silently through the fortress, how to notice patterns, how to trust instincts even when the heart screamed doubt. She resisted at first, stubborn and wary, but slowly she began to see his reasoning, the method in his harshness.
Yet the tension between them grew.
Every interaction carried an electric charge, sometimes anger, sometimes frustration, sometimes something softer, something unnameable. She found herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, noting the way his expression softened when he believed no one observed, the way his hands moved with precision and strength. One evening, as the sky turned a bruised purple, a scout returned to the fortress with news. A neighboring kingdom had sent soldiers, armed and ready, to seize her. The prophecy, it seemed, had drawn not only protectors, but hunters. Cale's golden eyes flared with intensity, the first time Alara saw unrestrained fire in them. "They think to take what is mine, what belongs to destiny," he said through clenched teeth. They will regret it. Elara's heart raced. We cannot face them, she whispered. I am not a fighter, Kale. I cannot. You will learn, he interrupted, and I will teach you, not because I wish it, but because the child must be protected. You must survive. Both of you. The night stretched long. Elara could not sleep, haunted by visions of shadowy soldiers, of her child at risk, of the weight of prophecy pressing down like stone. She felt small, fragile, human, and yet, in the presence of Kale, she also felt a strange strength, a growing certainty that perhaps together they could face the storm. Then, a shadow flickered outside her window. She froze. It moved with purpose, deliberate and silent, her breath caught in her throat. The fortress, for all its strength, suddenly seemed fragile against the threat gathering beyond the walls. Cal appeared behind her, silent as a shadow. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder. They are coming, he said. Prepare yourself. The night will not be quiet. Elara's pulse quickened. She looked at him, and for the first time she saw fear. Not for himself, but for her, for the child, for what they both carried. She nodded, trembling, but resolute. I will try, she said softly. Kale's golden eyes softened, a glimmer of something tender in the storm of his power. You will not fail, not while I stand. And as the first echo of approaching boots resounded against the stone walls, Elara realized the truth of it. Her exile was over. She had been cast out, hunted, and alone. But now, in Kale's shadow, she was part of something larger, something ancient, something dangerous, and perhaps something inevitable. The storm was coming, and the fortress would not hold them for long. The night air was sharp as blades, cutting through the fortress corridors as Elara and Kale prepared for what was coming. Outside, the storm of enemies had gathered, and even the thick stone walls seemed fragile under the weight of approaching boots. The child in her womb moved restlessly, as if sensing the danger, and Elara pressed a trembling hand to her stomach, feeling both fear and fierce determination. Kale moved beside her, silent and purposeful, his golden eyes scanning the dark beyond the battlements. He was calm, collected, and terrifying in his confidence. But tonight, she noticed something different. There was a tension there, a small fracture of worry that he could not entirely hide. You're afraid, she said softly, though she did not turn to face him. He glanced at her briefly, the shadow of a smile flickering across his face. Yes, he admitted, low and quiet, but not for myself. For you, and for what you carry. Elara felt her throat tighten. She had spent so long alone, so long believing she was fragile and unworthy. Yet here he was, a king, a warrior, a man feared across kingdoms, worried for her. She wanted to retreat, to tell him she could handle it, that she was strong. But the truth was clear. She needed him. The first skirmish came at dawn. Shadows moved along the frozen slopes. Soldiers armed with spears and swords, advancing toward the fortress gates. The first clash of steel against stone rang out like thunder. Kale led the defense, moving with precision, striking with a power that seemed almost supernatural. Elara watched from the battlements, her heart racing, her hands clenched tightly against the cold. This is not a place for the faint of heart, Kale said beside her, his voice steady despite the battle below. You must trust yourself. And trust me. Elara nodded, though the fear did not leave her. She had survived exile, betrayal, and the cold of the borderlands, but this was different. The prophecy, the danger, the weight of the child in her womb, it all pressed down like ice. Hours passed in a blur of arrows, clashing swords, and shouted commands. Kale fought with unmatched skill, But even he could not be everywhere at once. A group of soldiers breached a side gate, moving stealthily under the cover of smoke and shadow. Ilara's heart leapt into her throat as she saw them, unarmed, unprepared for the cunning of Kale's enemies. "Stay behind me!" Kale shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. But before she could move, a shadow lunged toward her. Instinct took over. She twisted, ducked, and used her momentum to push the intruder off balance. He fell, giving her just enough time to scramble behind a wall. Her hands shook, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Kale appeared beside her, his presence sudden and commanding. He swept her into his arms, carrying her away from danger with ease. "You must focus," he said. "Fear will protect you only so far. Courage will carry you further." Ilara nodded, swallowing her terror. She realized that this was more than survival. She could not remain passive. She had to learn, to fight, to trust not just Kale but herself. The battle raged for hours, and as night fell, the enemy forces finally retreated, leaving the fortress scarred, but standing. Smoke curled from the outer walls, and the ground was littered with broken weapons and fallen soldiers. Kale returned to her chamber, his expression unreadable, his golden eyes burning like molten fire. "You did well," he said softly, surprising her, "more than I expected." She began, but words failed her. The adrenaline was still high, her mind racing with the chaos of the day. She had survived, yes, but the cost of survival weighed heavily on her. Kale sat beside her, careful not to crowd her, his hand resting lightly on hers. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "And the child will inherit that strength. But strength alone is not enough. You must learn trust, patience, and the courage to face what you cannot see." Ilara's lips trembled. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Afraid I will fail, afraid the child will be taken from me, afraid of everything." Kale's hand tightened over hers. "Then let me carry the fear with you," he said softly. "You are not alone." For the first time since her exile, Ilara allowed herself to lean into him, to feel the warmth of his presence, the reassurance that someone so powerful cared for her. Not for her position, not for her child, but for her. The realization made her chest ache with longing, and something deeper, something she had not yet named. The following days were a mix of preparation and training. Kale taught her to move silently through the fortress, to notice subtle shifts in shadow and sound, to anticipate danger before it arrived. She resisted at first, clinging to her independence, but gradually she began to understand. She was not just learning to survive, she was learning to protect what mattered most. And then came the vision. One night, as the moon cast silver light over the frost-covered towers, Ilara awoke to a strange sensation. The air in her chamber felt thick, almost alive, and a shadow moved across the room, though no one was there. She pressed a hand to her stomach, feeling the child stir violently. A voice whispered, faint and cruel, weaving through her mind. "He will choose, but the wrong choice will consume you both." Ilara gasped, drawing in a shuddering breath. The words sent a chill through her, leaving her trembling. She did not understand fully, but she sensed the danger. The prophecy was moving faster than she could comprehend, and the forces surrounding them were stronger than any they had faced. Kyle appeared at the doorway, as if drawn by her fear. "A vision," he said softly. "I know." "You know?" Ilara whispered, turning to face him. "What does it mean? What do we do?" Kyle stepped closer, his golden eyes searching hers. "It means we must be ready, not just for what comes from without, but for what comes from within. The prophecy tests not only strength, but heart, trust, and choice. One wrong move, and all we hold dear could be lost." Ilara shivered, though not from the cold. The enormity of the task weighed on her, yet a flicker of determination sparked within. She would not let fear control her. She would not let her child be a pawn. She would face whatever came, with Kael, if she could trust him. Days later, Kael led her beyond the fortress walls, to the cliffs overlooking the frozen valley below. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of snow, ice, and something older, ancient, powerful, and full of promise and danger. "This place," Kael said, gesturing to the valley, "is where the prophecy will test you, where shadows and fire meet, and where courage will be weighed against fear." Elora's stomach tightened. She had imagined danger, yes, but not this. An actual confrontation with forces beyond her understanding, forces that moved in darkness and whispered promises of doom. They descended into the valley, Kael leading the way, his movements precise, every step a demonstration of skill, power, and control. The deeper they went, the more she sensed the unnatural. Shadows shifted, trees seemed alive, and whispers brushed against her ears, incomprehensible yet haunting. Suddenly, from behind a cluster of frost-covered rocks, a beast leapt, a creature of shadow and ice, with eyes like burning coals. Elara froze, terror rooting her in place. Kael moved instantly, placing himself between her and the creature. His hands glowed faintly, as if the golden fire of his bloodline had awakened. The creature lunged. Kael's strength was immense. He caught it mid-air, grappling it with a force that seemed almost beyond human. Elara watched, wide-eyed, as he subdued it, his movements precise and controlled. "You must learn to fight with more than your hands," he said, breathing heavily. "With your mind, your instincts, and your heart." Elara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. I will try," she said, her voice trembling. The night deepened, shadows stretching across the valley. They made camp near a small frozen stream, the fire between them flickering weakly against the cold. Elara felt the child move again, strong and determined. She realized that the child, like her, was learning, growing, ready to face the world even before birth. Kael sat beside her, the firelight casting shadows across his strong features.
"You are changing," he said softly. "Not just in body, but in spirit."
"You are learning. You are becoming what this prophecy needs you to be." Elara turned to him, her eyes meeting his golden gaze. "And you?" she asked quietly. "Are you changing too?" Kael's expression softened, just for a moment, revealing a vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. "Perhaps," he admitted, "perhaps I am learning to care, to hope, in ways I thought were lost to me." The wind rose again, carrying whispers from the dark valley below. Elara shivered but felt a new resolve. They had survived exile, betrayal, battle, and visions. Together, they would face whatever came, and yet, as the shadows deepened, a faint, cruel laugh echoed through the valley. It was not the wind. It was something else, something waiting, watching, patient. Elara's heart pounded as she pressed a hand to her stomach. Kael noticed, his golden eyes narrowing. "They are here," he said quietly, "and the real trial begins now." The darkness seemed to shift, alive and hungry. Elara realized the truth. Their journey had only just begun. The prophecy, the danger, the power, everything was moving toward a moment that would decide not just their fates, but the fate of the child she carried. Kael rose, moving to stand in front of her. "Whatever comes," he said, voice low and fierce, "I will not let anything harm you. Not shadow, not fire, not darkness itself." Elara's lips trembled. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. And somewhere deep inside, she knew she must. The first shadow moved, and the trial of fire and ice had begun. The first light of dawn stretched over the frozen valley, casting long shadows over jagged rocks and frost-covered trees. The battle from the night before had left the land scarred, smoke curling from broken trees, and the icy wind carried the scent of blood and magic. Alara tightened her cloak around her shoulders, feeling the weight of her unborn child, and shivered, not from the cold, but from the tension that had not yet lifted. Cale stood beside her, his golden eyes scanning the horizon. He was still powerful, still commanding. Yet there was a softness to him now, a calm born not from victory, but from shared survival. The night's trial had changed them both. The shadowed beast, the attack from unseen forces, and the whispers of prophecy had tested them in ways neither expected. "You are ready," Cale said quietly, his voice steady, yet warm. "The final trial awaits. Not outside these walls, but inside ourselves." Alara looked at him, uncertain. "Inside ourselves?" "The prophecy is not merely about survival. It is about choice, about trust, about courage and sacrifice. You must face it, and so must I." They moved together toward the heart of the valley, where an ancient shrine lay hidden beneath frost and shadow. The stones were carved with symbols older than kingdoms, glowing faintly as if alive. The air here pulsed with magic, a rhythm that echoed in Alara's chest. The child moved restlessly, as if sensing the power surrounding them. "This is it," Cale said.
"Here, the prophecy will demand a choice, and that choice
"Will determine everything." Alara swallowed hard, feeling fear twist inside her like ice. She had survived exile, betrayal, and attacks from enemies, but this, the confrontation with fate itself, was something she could not prepare for. She wanted to hide, to run, but Cale's hand on hers steadied her. "You are not alone," he whispered. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The shadows around the shrine stirred, figures emerged, not entirely human, not entirely spirit, creatures of darkness, born from the ancient curse that had haunted Cale's bloodline. Their eyes glimmered like fire, and their movements were fluid, silent, and predatory. Alara's heart pounded, and she pressed a hand to her stomach. "They will try to take the child," Cale said softly, reading her fear. "But they will not succeed, not while I stand." He stepped forward, golden fire illuminating the dark air around him. Magic, fierce and pure, coursed from his body, forming a protective barrier. Alara could feel the warmth, the strength, and the unwavering determination. She realized that Cale's power was not just in his strength, but in his devotion, his will to protect what he loved. The creatures lunged. Cale moved like a storm, swift, precise, unstoppable. Yet the shadows were clever, shifting and multiplying, testing him, testing them both. Alara felt a surge of fear, but also determination. She could not remain passive. She lifted her hands, instinct guiding her, and focused on the power within her, the life growing inside her. A faint glow emanated from her belly, soft but steady, and the creatures recoiled, as if sensing the aura. Cale glanced at her, eyes wide with recognition. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "Your courage is the key. Trust it." Alara nodded, drawing deep breath after deep breath. She stepped forward, letting the glow from her child guide her movements. The shadows shrieked and recoiled, and slowly, inch by inch, the creatures were pushed back. Cale fought beside her, his golden fire and her light merging into a force neither darkness nor fear could withstand. Hours passed in what felt like moments. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the shrine with a pale, hopeful light. And then, with a final surge of power from both Cale and Alara, the shadows dissolved, their wails fading into silence. The curse had been broken, not through dominance or rage, but through trust, courage, and unity. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but alive, clutching her stomach. Cale knelt beside her, his hands covering hers, his golden eyes soft and warm. "You did it," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "We did it." Together, despair. Tears welled in Alara's eyes. She realized in that moment how far she had come. From exile and fear to strength and hope. And beside her, Cale, the feared Alpha King, was no longer only a figure of power. He was a protector, a partner, a man who had chosen love over fear, trust over control. The wind carried a gentle warmth as the first rays of sunlight kissed the frost. The prophecy had been fulfilled, not through violence or dominance, but through choice and courage. The child she carried was safe, protected by the bond that had grown between them, a bond stronger than any curse, stronger than any shadow. Cale helped her to her feet, and for the first time they stood as equals, not king and exile, not Alpha and Omega, but as two people bound by fate, by choice, and by love. Alara looked into Cale's eyes, and the fear that had haunted her for months finally began to fade.
"What now?"
she asked softly. Cale's golden eyes shimmered. "Now," he said, "we build what was promised to us. Not kingdoms, not thrones, but a life. Together. For the child. For us. For what we choose." She smiled, a real, genuine smile. And for the first time since her exile, she felt hope. The fortress, the frozen valley, the shadows, they were no longer threats but reminders of survival, of strength, and of the bond that had carried her through every trial. Days later, the kingdom began to heal. The borders softened, enemies withdrew, and whispers of the prophecy spread, not as a warning, but as a tale of courage, love, and redemption. Alara moved through the halls of the fortress with confidence, her steps lighter, her heart steadier. Cale walked beside her, silent but present, golden eyes ever watchful, yet softened by something he had not known for years: peace. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in crimson and gold, Alara rested against Cale. They watched the valley together, the child stirring gently within her. The warmth between them was not just physical, but emotional. A bond forged in trials, battles, and choices that had tested every part of them. Cale's voice broke the silence, low and soft. "No force in this world or the next will take you from me," he said. Alara smiled, pressing her hand over his. "And no fear will control us," she replied. "Not exile, not curse, not prophecy. We choose our own fate." The wind carried the sound of distant rivers, the whispers of leaves, and the quiet magic of a world healing. The fortress, once a place of fear and shadow, now stood as a symbol of survival, hope, and the power of love. Together they had faced the storm, the darkness, and the unknown. Together they had discovered strength beyond fear. Together they had claimed their future. As the stars began to appear, faint and silver against the twilight sky, Alara felt the first real sense of calm she had known in months. The child stirred, a small, powerful life, and she realized that every choice, every struggle, every moment of fear had led to this, the promise of a new beginning. Cale wrapped an arm around her, protective, steadfast, and tender. "Rest," he whispered. "Tomorrow, we begin a new journey. But tonight, we simply exist, together." Alara leaned into him, feeling the weight of the past lift, the warmth of the present settle, and the promise of the future glow faintly, like the first light of dawn over a frozen valley. The prophecy had come to pass, not as a chain, but as a choice, not as fear, but as love. And in the heart of the fortress, in the shadow of mountains and snow, two souls bound by fate finally found peace. The storm had passed. The shadows had fallen, and the child, the bond, and the love they shared would carry them forward, stronger than any curse, brighter than any darkness. Elara closed her eyes, letting the quiet fill her, letting the warmth of Kale's presence settle into her bones. She was no longer alone. She was no longer exiled. She was home. And in that quiet, golden moment, the future waited. Vast, open, and full of promise.